Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the forum. How's everyone doing tonight? Let's hear and see us, okay? Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. This competition is something that, that the Alliance and that our members are incredibly excited about. The work that all of our panelists have done, the work that our audience members have done to support affordable housing generally, I think is really exciting. And this is a great forum to share what those successes have been, to talk about some of the challenges that we've faced in getting here. And I think to begin looking forward to the future and what is on its way as well. I want to set the scene just slightly before we turn it over to the panel to introduce themselves and to talk about what their role in this process has been, with a little bit of scene setting on where Central Ohio is in our affordable housing discussion and what kinds of barriers we're facing. I think one of the statistics everybody has heard, perhaps ad nauseum, because I know that I say it every time I'm out in the world, is that we have 54,000 Franklin County households that are paying more than half of their income towards housing costs. And we know that if you're paying more than 30% of your income towards housing, that's being cost burden. That's a red flag. But if you're reaching that mark where you're now paying more than half of your income towards housing, what that means is that you're essentially making life and death decisions for your family every month when it comes time to pay that bill. That families are looking at whether or not to pay for their prescription medicine or to pay for their housing, whether to pull an extra shift at work so you can cover the mortgage, or to spend time with your family and to cook them a healthy meal and help your kids with their homework. So to have 54,000 households who are in that decision-making process every month is a real red flag for our community as a whole. We also know that when it comes to the bricks and sticks sides of that equation, we are not building and constructing to meet what our growth pattern is. The BIA of Central Ohio has estimated that we need to build about 14,000 homes per year just to lock in the housing crisis as bad as it is, without letting that number inflate any further. And historically, in recent years, we've only been building about 8,000 homes a year, so barely half of that target. Even last year, which was one of our best years on record, we only hit a little over 11,000. So still continuing to kind of dig that hole, which I think is prompting a lot of conversations like you are hosting with this conversation on how we solve that. When you look at how we compare to some of our regional partners, we know, for instance, that we're building fewer homes than Raleigh, North Carolina, and Raleigh has about half of our population. To look at some of the peers that we're often compared to, we're building less than Charlotte, we're building less than Nashville, and we're building about a quarter of what Austin is. And I think Austin is a real bellwether for Columbus to look towards, because we are not yet at the crisis level stages they are, but that is what we are building towards if we don't come up with some solutions quite quickly. I think there have been a lot of questions as well about how COVID-19 has impacted this landscape. And one of the things that we're doing is following national trends. We're following national data. And what's telling us is that 1 in 4 households, 1 in 4 renter households in particular in Ohio, are at risk of eviction. And they weren't entirely sure how they were going to make their October rent payment even days before it was coming due. So statistically speaking, if you know 4 renters, 4 cousins, 4 colleagues, one of them is struggling with their housing costs right now. We know that COVID-19 has also had a very serious impact on the construction community and our ability to build to meeting that goal. The Alliance, our members, saw at least a 16% increase in construction costs and building materials during COVID-19, due in part to supply chain issues, due in part to labor issues. But that 16% increase in cost was not met with any related increase in the funding sources that you're used to support affordable housing. And again, unless we come up with something to respond to that, what that ultimately is going to translate is to less affordable construction and a building towards a longer term challenge. These are not issues that we've always had. Columbus has been historically a great place to live and work, and it still is. Affordability and the ability for employers to come and have safe, accessible places for their employees to work is one of our calling cards. And I think with that, I want to stop and I want to allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves. because each of them in their own ways are working towards responding to these issues. And I think to just start off, I will let you know, Curtis, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself first. But before that, I want to acknowledge all of the positive work that we have in our favor here. The City of Columbus, the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, our mayor's leadership, our city council leadership. We're in a really unique position here because everybody gets it, and we have a really great toolbox fleshed out to respond to this. Just in the last couple of years, some of the initiatives that we've been able to see kind of come to fruition and really grow to meet our need is source of income ordinances, starting in Bexley, the City of Columbus, Reynoldsburg, Westerville, Worthington. That's a really great model that not everybody in our state has been able to claim ownership of, but we certainly have. The Affordable Housing Fund through the City of Columbus and through the bond work that they were able to do, the Franklin County Magnet Fund, these are all really great assets that our community has. So with that kind of thanks and recognition, let me turn to Curtis to introduce himself, and we'll go through the rest of the panel.
Carlie, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Let me say that I'm really happy to be here and really to part of this discussion. It's a critical discussion that our community needs to have now and into the future. As Carlie said, my name is Curtis Williams. I serve as president and CEO of COCIC, which is a private nonprofit development organization that was formed by Franklin County Commissioners. And we are serving as a Franklin County Landbank. And I'm also president and CEO of the Central Ohio Community Land Trust. And the focus of the land trust, as it being a subsidiary of COCIC, is to focus on building affordable housing within Franklin County.
Great, thank you, Curtis, and welcome to the panel. And I'd like to say hello and talk a little bit about what your role is in this work.
Sorry. Yes, thanks. Thank you, Carlie, and thank you for making me follow Curtis. So my name is Andrew Dyer. I serve as Senior Policy Advisor in the Legislative Research Office for Columbus City Council. So serve all 7 members of City Council, specifically in economic development, housing, zoning, and education.
Great, thank you and welcome. Isabela, good evening. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much. I am really very happy to be on the panel and glad to be here after this effort. So hello everybody, my name is Isabela Gould. I am the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Design Center. We are a nonprofit organization, have been around for about 40 years. And we work with the belief that design is a right, not a privilege, and serve underserved neighborhoods in Columbus and Central Ohio. Basically, we help people put their big dreams on the table and build towards a better future. Delighted to be there.
Great. Thank you for being here. Last, most certainly not least, our contest winners, Tim and Eliza. Good evening.
Hi. Hello. Good evening. So my name is Tim Lai, I'm Lai ArchitecT, and first of all, I want to say that we are very grateful for this opportunity to have this competition that so that we were allowed to contribute to this conversation that is quite important socially, and I have to say that I am very proud of my fellow architects in Columbus and around Columbus who submitted these wonderful entries. I hope that some of them would people will be able to see all of these entries. I think it's really, really great, and I cannot be more proud to be part of that community.
Good evening. My name is Eliza Ho. I'm a partner in crime with Tim Lai for 11 years with Tim Lai ArchitecT. Well, I'm very grateful to be here, and first and foremost, I really want to thank my team at my office. I have a very small size office, And each of the team members have contributed greatly, to this conversation. And they are John Fleming, Paige Fleming, Willow O'Keefe, and Sarah Montague. Without them, Tim and I would not be sitting here, and to continue this conversation. So thank you.
Well, and congratulations. I'm going to step on some of the announcement just a little bit, but I want everybody to know that the next home exhibit is on display at the Center for Architecture and Design, and it's wonderful. And congratulations and thank you for all your work. We're going to talk about that competition itself more in just a minute, but I want to lay a little bit of a foundation first. And again, if I can start with you, Curtis. My understanding is that this was a brainchild of yours and that you were, one of the first people to come up with this idea and to really advance it. Can you tell me, first and foremost, what is the land trust and how was this idea something that really originated from your team?
Well, thank you. This has been a total success. And if I could take credit for it, I would. I can't. So let me be fair and honest. Let me share the responsibility of this great project with the City of Columbus, Franklin County, the BIA, the AIA, Neighborhood Design Center. So this is a really result of a partnership, a relationship to deal with the affordable housing issue. It wasn't necessarily my brainchild. I think it stemmed from the City of Columbus's Parcel to Places project that happened a couple of years ago. I believe the city wanted to do something again, and the purpose of that Parcel to Places project was to find a way to reuse properties that were once blighted. And so it turned out to be a success. And if I speak wrong about this, please someone correct me. But there were a lot of folks that participated in that contest. And if you had a project that was worthy, you won perhaps the opportunity to build that project on that vacant parcel that's the city owned. And you will find a number of projects scattered throughout the City of Columbus. And it really was a great project. So this emanated from that, where the city wanted to do something again, and the focus was going to be on affordable housing, which obviously we were very interested in, right? And the fact that we share offices with the City of Columbus's land bank gave us opportunity to talk about this quite a lot. While we're having coffee, while we're drinking water, while we're doing other stuff in the office. And really what came out of that conversation was, okay, guys, look, this is a great idea, but let's take it to the next level. Let's be serious about it. Let's not make it just a design contest, okay? Design's great, love it. Pictures are wonderful, renderings are wonderful, but our charge as a county, city, land trust is to build affordable housing. We had a lot of conversation about the elements of affordable housing, the issues that kind of stood in the way of building affordable housing. So we were very geared towards, let's see if we can get a product or products that can be done affordably and address all the issues from design, construction, material use, the whole 9 yards. Let's try to be practical in this. Let's make it a challenge. Let's see if we can get this done at a reasonable price, an affordable price, and something that we can replicate and find out what the problems are in getting it done. So that was a challenge. And we decided to move forward with the help of the Design Center, and the City of Columbus obviously bought into it. And that's what brought us here today, to take it from design to make it practical. And by the number of people that were interested in it and sort of responded by their design, it shows that, I don't want to say we hit a nerve, we hit a nerve in such that people are interested in making that change and doing something realistic and practical to deal with the issue of affordable housing.
Yeah. I mean, I think hit it, understating it just slightly. And on that note, Isabel, I wonder if you can comment and talk a little bit about how many applications you received for the competition and what that means for you.
Yeah, so before I talk about it, I have to say that when Curtis said, let's put out this idea about, building a unit for $117,000, I thought it was crazy. And honestly, it was really a great challenge, but we all recognize that it had to be addressed. And having the commitment with a budget was really, really important and elevated really the competition to the next level. Most design competitions are purely, creative and visioning, and they stop there. But having that budget to address with that much reality, sense of reality and responsibility, we felt it was incredible. So we figured out an ask, and we all felt along the way it was a really heavy ask, really tough. We were asking a lot. And we couldn't believe that we had 56 applications, people interested initially in submitting. We thought maybe we'd have, 15, 20, 30, but we couldn't believe the interest. So that was wonderful to see. And then final submissions, we received 32 actual submissions that actually stuck to what we asked for. So people took really seriously the really detailed elements of our ask and answered our call. It was really considerate. It was way above what we expected. Quite a success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly people in the audience who've seen competitions that have gotten maybe 3 or 4 good responsive submissions, and you blew that standard out of the water, I think. Andrew, if I can turn to you, I think for me, one of the interesting things about this competition, but about Columbus in general and the way that our housing actors and professionals work together is kind of this lack of competition, that everybody is in it to solve a problem and that everybody is incredibly collaborative. I'm wondering if you can talk about whether this competition was something that was able to continue breaking down that silo, and what you think is coming from that.
Yeah, so I agree with that, but I think realistically, from a council perspective, it all starts with the housing chair, Councilmember Faber, and all of council think housing as a priority. I sometimes take that for granted, that I feel that every municipality that has any type of crisis or any type of housing shortage, that should be the number one. But to have 7 council members that collectively feel the need for additional housing and quality product, it starts there. And then, with this competition, Curtis talked about parcels to places, and that took, vacant structures or vacant parcels and turned them into useful community spaces. And so, it's kind of a chicken and the egg type thing where useful spaces then turn into community centers for folks that are in these neighborhoods, but you can't have folks in the neighborhoods unless you provide safe and sanitary housing. So it was a great competition, and this was a follow-up. And I love that we call it a competition, but to us, it's a model. It's another model for successful development in Columbus, for another way to provide safe and sanitary housing in neighborhoods. And so, this was a competition. I've said this throughout the process that there were a couple of ones that were not awarded that I, said after this competition is over, we want to have conversations with them because their model, their design was really innovative, or it was a design that really fits what Columbus can do in addition to all of the proposals that won or received honorable mention. So, it was a no-brainer from council side, and we would love to see any and all of these types of, quote unquote competitions that provide a way for big developers, the middle tier and the smaller folks that just want to get into the housing development here in Columbus to be creative and, kind of show us how we can get to the development of the units that are necessary to support the growth that we expect to see.
That's great. I want to turn to our winners. I want to turn to Tim and Eliza, and I'm wondering if, pardon me for the cell phone, this is work from home life now, isn't it? But tell me, how did the idea start? Like, where did you begin putting pen to paper? What was in your mind, and how did you come up with your creation?
Well, let's start with, how we decided to enter, to put in a proposal first, right? So Tim got an email from a colleague back in the days. Well, it isn't, this year, but then it's an ex-coworker, in another firm, kind of reminding Tim, well, there's a competition, for the city of Columbus, about affordable housing. Make sure that your team will, put in a proposal. And, Tim kind of bring it back to, our whole team in the office, and we talk about that. And we jump on board because we feel like this is a professional obligation that we need to, join the conversation. My office, most of my team members, they are in their 20s, in their 30s, and a lot of them are, still in the rental, arrangement, in their housing situation. And some of them, they started to look for new houses, and we all face the same difficulty in finding something more affordable, especially for the first time home buyer. So and they they told us about the story, looking for different places, or they even try to think about an idea of building their own home, because as designer, as architect, we always want to design our own space, something that is that we feel we own the space, instead of just buying somewhere else and and renovate it, and things like that. So, but then it looks like it's just very difficult. And then I thought about myself. I have 2 teenagers now, and in 5 years, 10 years, they would want to own a home. And would I be in a position to help them to build a home or buy a house and something like that? So I understand that it is a personal issue, so we have been hearing from news, about the housing shortage and, how hot the real estate market has been. And we know that it's going to be our problem, sooner or later. So we think that it is a great opportunity that we can contribute our ideas, to the competition. And maybe Tim can talk about how how we actually put together the concept.
Yeah, so I think, internally we, as a team, kind of brainstorm, different ideas about how do we tackle this in a problem solving, kind of approach. Part of the problem, of affordable housing for us at least is that we always, when you first started, well, first of all, the need for housing or your need for your house change over time. When you're younger, before you have kids, to when you have kids, your kids get older, to when your kids leave for college or whatever, and then, and we can't just say, oh, everyone's gonna live in a 3-bedroom, house, and that's the end of it. So we are really interested in a solution that actually can, we call it a half of a good house. So the idea is really that, we want to propose a structure that you only need to build half of it. So therefore the cost will be lower, and maybe you can afford a little bit nicer quality in exchange of a smaller space, but then has the flexibility and has the potential to add onto it later on. Especially our own experience, it seems like, we also do a lot of residential projects, and a lot of our clients come to us, it's because they want a big addition. Everyone's a big addition, and everyone a big kitchen, and all that. And so we see that, well, you don't need all those space when you first started out. Why don't you start small and then have a way to expand. So that's really kind of an idea in our head that we're like, okay, let's see if it will work, and then we turn that into a design, proposal and solution that's just to test out to see if it works. So that's kind of, I see that's how we look at the problem in that way, in a more kind of almost like a product design, sort of way. I'm glad that the jury, was finding it interesting, to do that.
I mean, as you're describing that, oh, sorry, please continue.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that the other inspiration for the concept of Felix, our entry, is really, during the pandemic time, people spend a lot more time at home, and we need to be nimble, kind of like move stuff around and turn our living space into a workspace. And a lot of time we, found a refuge in the outdoor area. So the integration between the indoor and outdoor becomes essential to our daily life. I was just talking with my kids this morning, I just missed the day that, you guys are, at home doing the online classes, or I can see you all the time and all that. And I remember I took 3 times walk in the neighborhood, with the kids, last year. And I truly enjoy on a daily basis. It's just that the outside area, is so important to the quality of my life. And I would imagine that it applies to, everyone too. So, the Felix, the concept, to bring the outside in and, to kind of like, but then it's not completely segregated, from outside. We feel it is an important element, for today's home.
Both of you, the way that you're describing it, the thing that's sticking with me is how inclusive that is, right? It's designed to be responsive to a pandemic. It's designed to be responsive post-pandemic for families with young kids, but then those who, might be empty nesters. I mean, do you get the sense too, as the designers, do you really feel that housing itself can be a platform for inclusivity and diversity?
I think it has to be. I mean, that's the job of creating, a design or a housing, elements that they can adapt to different needs, right? That's kind of like you have to do that almost.
I mean, I think if you'll let me, I'd kind of like to continue that theme to our other panelists. And Isabel, your work spans a lot of different disciplines. You see housing, you see commercial. Is that something that you feel in design as well? Is that design and inclusivity really go hand in hand?
Oh, absolutely. And absolutely. And it's about time. The time is right now more than ever to address inclusivity, equity, diversity. We see so much change today and so much need. And absolutely, if not now, then when? It's really important. I think this competition try to remain open from that standpoint and really embrace any models that the teams could come up with it and be put forward. So I absolutely believe it's a must.
Andrew, I'm going to segue to you, and I'd like, with the foundation, for those who might not know in the audience, the City Council, under Councilwoman Favors' leadership, just passed the Housing for All package, which I think has integration and diversity at its heart. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And, if you see that, being something that bounces off well with the competition?
So the Housing for All was 3 different pieces of legislation. So first, and probably the largest piece, was source of income discrimination. So cannot discriminate based on their source of income for renters. A piece that was called Renter's Choice, which allowed tenants to pay their security deposit over 3 and 6 month equal payments. So they could pay the full deposit if they so chose, but they could also do it over 3 and 6 months. And then the rental receipt. So if you pay online and you are generated an email, that's a receipt. But for folks that used cash, or for folks that would put, any type of cash or something in a Dropbox, it all spurred under this idea that we needed to increase, tenant protections. We were seeing folks that unfortunately, wouldn't be provided a receipt, and then there would be a he said, she said, as far as if the rent was paid. And then the source of income. We obviously know that housing choice vouchers take up the majority of the kind of tenant protection as far as source of income. So, I mean, I think anything we do as far as creative housing opportunities is going to help this, these continuing pervasive issues. We are providing mixed income, mixed use housing. And so that provides that community, that provides that development, which, for folks that sometimes get concerned over property values, mixed use and mixed income developments generate increased property value, right? You can find studies, you can find a study for any point that you want to make, but the majority of the studies show this. And so, we plan, and Councilmember Favor has said this. So, I hope that she's okay if I say it, but there's more to come, right? So these three are the start to kind of this overhaul of how do we make sure both landlords and tenants know their rights and know their responsibilities, and we educate everybody to know exactly what they can and cannot do, and if something happens, what the reaction needs to be. So this competition, provided alternate ways for supporting housing development and supporting that neighborhood feel. They all go together with council's priority in housing.
And to finish with you, Curtis, and this was something that Isabela said, is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? It's not just inclusion. There's a lot of issues that we're tackling, but to put a really fine point on it, do you think affordable, accessible housing is a DE&I strategy?
Yes, it is. Let me say this, and I guess I always say this, need to say this, that everyone deserves safe and affordable housing. Everyone does, no matter who they are, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what station of life that we're born into, they need it. And it's our responsibility as a community to provide. And there's different ways to provide. I love what Columbus City Council is doing. They're looking at it very pragmatically and trying to make it work in this rental space and also in the homeownership space. These issues have been around a very long time. They bad language intended. They ain't new. They've been around a very long time, and look at me, I've been around a very long time. And as long as I've been around, we've been talking about affordable housing and the lack thereof of affordable housing. I remember the words that someone said to me yesterday. I heard those words 30, 40 years ago. I have, and it just shows that we still need to work hard at fulfilling our promise to make sure that people have safe and affordable housing at all levels. And what's really striking now, that given the demand in Central Ohio, the lack of product in Central Ohio, you're talking, you can hear people who are making a lot of money not being able to afford housing if they find it. So we're moving from affordable housing, trying to change what those words mean, to finding housing that's affordable across the spectrum. So, and we have to do that. We have to touch every element of that. And it's amazing when you look at the Community Land Trust, which is literally a 2-year-old organization that was started by Franklin County Commissioners and the City of Columbus Council to deal with affordable housing for folks, home ownership opportunities for folks making between $45,000 and $75,000 because there's a gap in their ability to find housing and then their ability to find housing, find it. In less than 2 years, we have built and sold 48 houses, which is amazing, 40. And we're going to have a 41st closing within the next week. The demand is there. And our process as a land trust, even though we write down the cost of the housing so that someone in the income level can afford it, it goes to show that we have to keep working. We have to find new models and new ways to put people in houses and keep people in homes, whether apartments or something that they want to buy. And our model helps sustain that over time. So we got to keep working at this. And that's why I'm so excited about this particular process we just went through, because it is a practical process. It starts to chip away at one element of the housing component, and that is cost. And so how many others are there? Andrew and I were talking earlier. We were talking about zoning. It's a critical issue, right? It does affect all the elements of affordability. So we ain't there yet. We still need to continue to work on it. And so I believe that we have to be creative and challenge ourselves and challenge our design professionals and our construction and building professionals. And we gotta do better. And so this is a start from our perspective.
I think that's a wonderful place to start the next question that I wanted to ask too. And I'm hoping that all of the panelists can kind of chime in here and just go through. But there's so much awareness that we need affordable housing. And there's so many people who want to build affordable housing. Why is it so hard? I mean, go further into that. What are those barriers? Why was this competition necessary?
You're going to get me in trouble.
I am sure not trying to. Andrew, you might need to close your ears for a minute.
No, I think it's a matter of a number of different things. Again, sometimes we react to a need, right? And so if things are okay, we're building houses, people are buying houses, why change for the most part, right? And I think that's part of it. I think our community and most communities get stuck, if you will, in the same way of doing things because they believe it works. And unless they're challenged, nothing new happens, nothing better happens. Things don't change. And so we've got a wonderful development community in Columbus, Franklin County, Central Ohio, in Ohio, where we have folks who know how to build houses. We have developers that can plan developments and great things happen. Great things come out of the ground. So it's not a question of building homes or building communities. It's a question of, should we do it differently? Why can't we do it differently in order to make it accessible to more people? That's the challenge. And I think that we haven't taken that up as a community. We just haven't done it. And I think the reason, and that's why this competition is very important, because it challenges folks. It gives people an opportunity to say, okay, now I can think out of the box. I have a reason to. Where before, why should I? You know, I'm going to make money. I'm going to design this house and I'm going to sell it for $400,000. Okay, I got my profit margin. I'm good. So we have to challenge those folks. We have to challenge our partners in this game to think differently, to do better. And I think that's why this competition was a success. That's why we've got so many applicants, and so many calls talking about it. I tell you, I've got calls from builders and developers who say, look, I don't have to enter the contest. I can build it 450. I can build it 460. Okay, well, why aren't you doing that? You know, so, and I'm sorry to be a little silly here, but I think that's the conversation we need to have. Give people an opportunity to challenge themselves and do something. And we as a county land bank and land trust, our return is not that important. It's serving the better good. And so we don't have to have a big profit in order to make it. We don't. We're a nonprofit. Take that word seriously. How do we go about making change?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is, you know, I think we always need to put an emphasis on housing. We're always going to. That's why we have, you know, 54,000 families that spend half or more of their income on their rent. It's a pervasive issue. It's not going to be fixed in the next year or two. And that's not an excuse. But, you know, you start to see, you know, Curtis understated the impact that the land trust has already had. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but by the end of the next year, it will be the largest land trust in the state of Ohio. That is, you know, 3 years of, you know, obviously years in the making. But when it began and they started to construct houses, we're talking about less than 3 years, and it's going to be the biggest in the state. And so that is a huge affordable housing, a forever affordable housing tool that we have. You know, one other example is council. We just passed a zoning on Monday, two days ago. and it was for commercial, single family, and multifamily. So mixed use. The single family is market rate. The multifamily is 260 units at 60% AMI. So you've now created over 400 or right around 400 units of total housing, and you've created mixed use, and you've created mixed income. And those projects are becoming more and more common when we see it in front of council from either a zoning or an economic development perspective. So we've got a long way to go, but I think that there's been a movement here recently with, you know, city, county, and organizations like Neighborhood Design Center, like, you know, partners like architects and builders. You know, there's been this community movement of how do we get there and how do we start to chip away at that number. And I think you're starting to see it. And the worst thing we can do now is not do any more of these competitions or not do any more of this stuff and kind of say, well, we're moving forward, so let's, you know, we're in good shape, let's just kind of cruise. I think, you know, now more than ever is these plus more opportunities. Where can we go from here? What can we add to the things that we are continuing at?
So on the question of why was this competition necessary, I think it's a really important question. I have a couple of things I'd like to add. One is the question of affordability, housing affordability is a really big question, and local problem, regional problem, national problem, right? It cannot be addressed alone. We cannot just go out there and say, let's just have a competition, put out an ask, you know, with a top-down type of approach. It has to be a partnership. We have to tackle it as a partnership. So yes, this is a first step, but forming that partnership and really acknowledging that it is not something that we can solve alone, to us at least, was really important. We, interestingly, though, we don't really do residential work, but most of our work is commercial, but you will not have success in the areas where we work unless housing is also fixed. So it goes hand in hand. So recognizing the importance of forming the partnership for the long run, for the long haul, it was fundamental. The second thing, we also go in our communities with a bottom-up approach. We like to listen to the communities and hear them out. And it's too often that, you know, they're used to, again, the top-down approach where people go in and tell them what to do, how to live, how to build, how to, you know, transform their neighborhoods. And it was also important that part of this process that we were fair, that we included voices of the communities. And that we listened to. So we had representatives from the area commission and from the two communities, the city of Whitehall. So very important to be inclusive that way, to hear truly what is needed. So if we are to move this question forward, how do we move it to ultimately really benefit and bring true change to this really simple, the most simple fundamental questions about living today? And I think that that's why it was necessary, because change is necessary with the times, and we have to hear everybody out.
Tim and Eliza, I want to finish with you on this topic, but from a very tactical standpoint, what was the hardest part about staying under that dollar limit, about keeping in budget?
I mean, I actually want to, I mean, that actually leads to something that I've been thinking about, that is sometimes we don't really think about, like when we think about affordable housing or affordable, you know, residential, you know, structure, you know, a lot of times we think about it from a very macro point of view, you know, about this whole market thing and people can't afford it, but we deal with that on a very kind of on a very, how to say it, a very intimate level that is hard. Like as an architect, and I'm sure that if there's architect listening to this, we know we always find a way to design something that cannot fit the budget for some reason. The budget always is not enough for some reason, right? Now that's a joke, but at the same time, what we see on our actual project is that, especially, it's not just on the residential side, but on the residential side, it's like it's that construction industry is a very complicated system that they are understaffed, and they require skilled laborers, trade people. And those people are not always available. I mean, the supply chain on the labor side, let alone the material side that we are facing right now, on the supply chain, all the aluminum, all the steel, all the, before it was the lumber, that's the material side. But the labor side is also in short supply all the time, especially when you deal with a city like Columbus that you have all these apartments with being built, all the hotel and office being built across the river, next to COCIC. I mean, they need people to build these things, right, every day. And our experience is that it's really, really hard to find, people, laborers, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, trade people to actually build our design, framers, roofer, drywall, painter, concrete people. All those people are in short supply. And the question I have is actually that part of it is a cultural thing, right? I think the cultural thing, part of it is that all the people, it's funny because I think somehow it's related to the pandemic. Like we talk about the labor shortage right now, right? In all kinds of service industry, especially in the hospitality industry, I would say. And people are fed up. They're like, well, I have to do this before because I have to, but then I don't want to do it anymore, right? It's not very, it's not very satisfying. It's not really building a career out of that, right? I can't work in a restaurant forever, right? And they want to change. They want to change career. And what I've been hearing a lot of times is that when they change career, they like to go to a more high tech, they want to learn coding. They want to know how to do accounting or, go into the office work, right? Because that's not as stressful as going into work in a restaurant. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, these people should, if you really want a good job, go into construction or go into trade. They actually are very, very well paid and they have a good career. And they, and there's all these, there's a lot of opportunity. And I feel like that part of it is part of it is also the labor, how do we fit the supply and demand, because I mean, forget about affordable housing. I mean, I can't even find people to build a reasonably priced house, and a addition and renovation, all that stuff, let alone affordable. So how do we actually, is there any partnership, like public-private partnership that can actually provide job trainings and different things that actually those people can learn how to do these things while building for the affordable price, right? Because a big part of the cost that we talk about is labor. And if we can find a creative way to bring these people as partners to instead of, have to at the mercy of whoever is not as busy to build this thing, right? How do we do that, right? How do we bring that construction team so that you really need that whole system, the whole assembly line, if you will, to make it happen?
And if I could add to what Tim has just said, and you talked about a lot of parts there, and you really talked about elements of a system that affects affordability, from labor to supply chain to all of these particular elements. And we're dealing with a part of that in the design. And so it's a systemic issue that needs to have a systemic approach to resolve. It just does, right? You can't do this without the labor. You can't do this without somehow affecting the supply chain, which is really broken, right? So I think what's going to come out of it is this has to, because it's affecting all the economies globally, is how do you get product from one place to the other? And so someone's going to come up with a solution. Changes are going to be made to the whole process. And how do we, where do the materials come from? And how do you pay for all these elements? Land is a big issue as well. The price of land has skyrocketed because, right? So you have these parts that create a system, and we have to attack it systemically. We are part of a lot of conversations where we're talking about helping to generate the workforce necessary for the construction industry. We're in those conversations right now. There are people that are out of work, obviously, through COVID and some other reasons, And so we got to find a way to get people to work, and we get them trained. And that's that entire system. And the more we talk about this and those particular elements, and look at it, break the system down to its individual parts, and we do that all the time, I think we can start to have an impact. I really believe that.
Andrew, I'd love to hear if you have additional thoughts to share on this, especially as it comes to public-private partnerships for economic mobility, because it sounds like that's a lot of what Tim was honing in on, and I know you've done a lot of work in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, again, there's kind of this groundswell movement for opportunity. So, I think council is interested in a number of different kind of ideas or ways to have that public-private partnership. We know, for example, that 8 or 9 years ago, from the land bank perspective, we had over 6,000 vacant lots. We're down to 3,500. Right, so you look at the progress that we've made with some of these vacant lots, but you also look at you go from 6,000 to 3,500, and it's accurate. This is true progress. But then the other side of that is you still have 3,500 vacant lots. So what do we do with that? Is there a way that we can? And John and Reza and the folks at the land bank have done a fantastic job at coming up with some creative ideas for how to get some of these lots to have units built on them. What else can we do? Can we put a affordability component in there somewhere in a program? Can we take some of those lots and really make a dent with the help of the land trust, right? So just one example of a way that we can use all the folks at our disposal to figure out housing policy and programs. We were talking about the skills trades and getting younger folks to have this skill set. In 2016, Councilmember Jaiza Page, now Judge Jaiza Page, we did learning skills to lift neighborhoods. And it was a competition that allowed folks to have dollars to build, with an emphasis on using land bank lots and with an emphasis on either restored citizens or youth experience and trades. And we had 3 different winners, all of whom built on multiple lots using our youth and using our restored citizen population, where they gained that skill set, and they also developed units on houses or on lots. They developed houses on lots. So that was successful. So do we bring that back? Do we build and expand that? We are, I know that, like I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the council housing is a council priority. So if there are creative ways, part of my job is to research what other cities are doing, and what they've done well, what they haven't done well, what can Columbus do that other cities can or cannot do. To work with Ohio State, we have a large university here that has housing classes, that has architecture classes that deal with a lot of these policies and principles. And so working with our universities to come up with these creative ways to create public-private partnerships, to come up with partnerships with the county, with the city, with the, whomever and whatever to bridge this gap of units that we need.
Great, thank you. I would like to circle back a little bit to something that you said a moment ago, Isabela, about starting at the bottom and working your way up and really engaging the community deeply in what this looks like. And one of the thoughts I have around that is that good design and design can be the antidote to NIMBY. It can nullify community opposition if that's rooted in fear. Being part of the process seems to be a solution to that. I would love to get your thoughts and just expand on that theme. And then maybe if the rest of the panel can also talk too about NIMBY, like what is it? And how do you think we get around that? How do we respond to that?
Well, yes, so we really like to approach our work on that ground, bottom-up approach, we call it. And we feel it's really important to involve the communities. And I think when it comes to design, a lot more at the this also needs to happen. There's no reason why good design cannot really filter down to the most simple, beautiful solutions in our neighborhoods. Oftentimes, I think people don't necessarily understand design. So I think that the more conversation, the more, the earlier we involve the communities in what we do, the better overall. I think as a result, I think with this process, it really needs to continue at the community level as we move forward. And I really love if just the submissions and everything that was done would have more exposure and more conversation would really happen. I don't know. I think it's we have a long way to go, I think, and I do believe that there will be great solutions that become part of communities and not be really ruled out once there's an understanding and with solid communication about what people do.
Curtis, you've got thoughts.
Thank you. That's a very pointed question. As a former zoning official, development official, public development official, I would tell you that NIMBYism is really formed out of misinformation, and it's a social and economic issue that just really born out of misinformation and lack of connectivity to among our community folk. And so it's usually born out of folks who don't want people to live by them because they think they're inferior economically and socially. They don't want folks that are in those certain categories living next to them because it may impact their economic wealth from the standpoint of home value, valuation of the properties, and this, that, and the other. And it's just misinformation. And I believe the more we engage with one another in all settings, the more those fears will fall by the wayside. So that's why we have to build communities for everyone. We've got to find a way to get folks exposed in all situations to one another. We just do. Otherwise, it's going to be there. And it's just across the spectrum. No matter what community, what neighborhood you're talking about, there is some of that. There's that misunderstanding. And the more we can show that it works, we have people of different backgrounds, different economic statuses, living and working together, the better we'll be. It is certainly a big issue. I certainly think that design is part of that, because when you look at the design, you kind of sort of say a lot about the person who lives in that space. They may not be as economically in the same category as you are, but they sure look like it because they got a great house now, and quite honestly, we want to spread that wealth by, this is one of the things that come out of that, this contest. We can put these houses in any neighborhood and they will fit, and they make people look like they have $5 million in the bank because they're that kind of design, that kind of thoughtful living space that is important for neighborhoods and people live in neighborhoods. So it says a lot about the people and that will live on these houses. And hopefully through this contest, we could build, like you say, through some of these houses that weren't the winner, but there's a place for them in our neighborhoods, right? So we just have to be thoughtful about that. And that's a very heady question. Probably. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for such.
Yeah, if I can, add to, Curtis' comment, I truly, echo his sentiments about, because I think, this competition, there is a reason it is named Next Home instead of emphasizing affordability. So I think the name Next Home, it just projects to the future that, well, this is for our next generation, or what can your next home look like? So I feel like it is a very neutral term. We are only looking into the future. It's kind of like neutralize that affordability or the economic connotation that's behind affordability. So I think the name Next Home is a big step, that we can kind of expand our imagination already, what the future can look like, and everyone can dream of something, and it is a very equal opportunity, to dream, so I think it is, one step forward, and because of that, I think, within our team, we truly think that, it is not only for people who needs the help, it is truly, how we can live in the future. It is more like a cultural shift in terms, looking inward, what kind of house that we want to live in, what kind of a community that we want to build. We do want, our proposal, Felix, to be, we want to put humanize the design of it, to make it approachable. I think that, Isabela, you talk about, it's more like a grassroots type of, we need to get to know the community to see like how design is being received and, truly listen to that. And design, a good design has to come from, the community itself. And I think, the idea of flexibility, adaptability, would be the essential elements, components to the Next Home.
Definitely, I think that there's certainly preconceptions about what housing should look like. This is what housing is and should be. And I think we way too often go back to that when we really shouldn't. We live in a time where I think people have found a lot more freedom for their own dreams and aspirations and trying to carry them out. And I think that with this competition, definitely, I'm hoping that we can open up this idea that design is there to help create this vision and formulate it. It doesn't have to be the traditional mode. It works. It can prove that it can work, right? So the misconceptions that are formed about, oh, anything looking more modern, it's not going to fit or it's not going to work out. There's plenty to prove that it does not have to be that way. We no longer, I think, live in a world where everybody puts them all. We're kind of all creating our own space, our own ideas, visions about who we are and how we want to live. So I think that was important, I think, in the competition to leave this door open to address how can we redefine new ways of living, right? What does living mean? How do we bring it into the neighborhood and kind of accept it? It's a long road again. I don't think it's easy. It's not an overnight process. People might react really negatively to this, but I think we can prove that.
I think that one of the things you're starting to touch on, Tim, why don't you go? I saw your hand.
Yeah, so, I was just thinking about the whole, like you talk about the NIMBY, idea that, at the end of the day, Carlie was saying it's misinformation, but it's also a, people, we always make decisions based on our perception a lot of times, especially when it comes to, housing. Because, well, I don't know if there's a particular reason, but I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of perception, a lot of prejudice going on, when it comes to that, like as simple as like picking the neighborhood that you want to move to. What kind of neighborhood is better than the other, right? There's all this perception out there. And maybe it's the same idea. It's like people have the perception of what kind of neighborhood they're living in. And they don't want certain elements or certain demographic to move into that without actually thinking about, well, how bad can it be, right? What exactly is the worst case scenario, right? What's the worst possible thing? And obviously, they might be thinking about the worst things that can happen to them, which that is not even true, or the possibility is very, very low, but that's how they think. And at the end of the day, right? It's about how do we have an open-minded, attitude about these things. I mean, on the other end of the spectrum, we always talk about our clients that obviously they have a lot of money to hire us to design the things for them, and they're asking for a lot of stuff that they don't really need, right? They watch the TV a lot, those HGTV. And they thought that, oh, I need to have this, I need to have this, I need to have this, and well, you know, you have a 5,000 square feet house. And I'm like, we don't need all these. If you don't build all these things, we might have people find these people to actually build some other houses for people instead of having to, to cater, all these like really, on the other end of the spectrum, demand. And so everything is kind of related, at the end of the day. But, I think Eliza was always very adamant about, that we need to try harder to tell people as designer, as architect, just as human being, that you don't need all this extra stuff to live a good life. You don't really need all this stuff. You want to focus on the quality instead of the quantity of stuff, right? It's easier said than done, obviously, but it's something that will go a long way if we can just move that a little bit.
Hey, Carlie, can I make one last comment on that? I apologize. What I like people to understand, and those communities that look at valuation of their property as a way to, I don't want to say keep people out, but that's their main issue, that whomever lives in the neighborhood or next door to them is going to devalue their property. I think people need to realize that they are eliminating the potential of their kids and grandkids living in their neighborhood. And to me, that's a very powerful statement as to why we all need to keep an open mind when we do this. And when we practice that kind of lack of thoughtfulness, if you will. Because their kids and their grandkids aren't going to be able to live next door, won't be able to live down the street because of the value of the homes that have to go in that particular neighborhood. And I see that more and more and more. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So thank you.
Well, I mean, thank you too, because my impression of what you're saying is that you're really speaking to the return on investment of affordable inclusive housing and affordable inclusive neighborhoods. And you mentioned the ability to stay a family and to stay in a neighborhood long-term and to really grow roots down there. One of my favorite ROIs is the value it has to our school system by having a nice, diverse group of students who mimic the world that those students are eventually going to grow up to work in. It's going to better prepare our kids for the future. I'm wondering, do others on the panel have kind of their favorite unexpected pro of affordable housing, that kind of silver lining that you don't think gets talked about enough? If I'm the only nerd, I totally understand.
Silver lining for housing?
Sure. I mean, what is one thing that affordable housing can do for our community that you don't think gets enough credit?
Well, let me just say this, and this is we're talking about affordable housing at any particular level, and this is something that our team lives through every day, and so does COCIC, which is Franklin County Landbank, shares a space with the city of Landbank. We call that space a Landbank Center. And so it's paid a ton of dividends for us and how we work together, how we operate. It really should be a model throughout the country, and it really is. Now, this is what we're dealing with on a daily basis in our particular neighborhood, at our building, that our team goes in every day. And every day, because COCIC owns the building, and we're property managers, we have to remove homeless folks from our entryway. We have to wake them up and tell them they have to leave. And what they leave behind is not the most sanitary thing in the world, right? So that's a reality. And so when we're talking about silver lining and affordable housing, if we had a series of programs, or we really dealt with this seriously, those folks wouldn't be there in our doorway. They would have a place to go. And so that is a very stark reality that we deal with every day. And we're not talking affordable housing at building a home for $280,000. We're talking about, again, basic need of folks who don't live in a home. we have to address that particular issue. And I know there's a segment of our community and the city supports working with homeless and providing funds to get these folks in the right atmosphere or environment. And so I'm not going to say more needs to be done, but that is an issue that we're dealing with from an affordable housing standpoint. So the silver lining is that we wouldn't have folks doing that if we were really focused a little bit more and trying to deal with the issues.
And I think one thing, silver lining / one thing that people don't talk about enough is, and I say this, of course, as Curtis just mentioned, so most people don't say this enough, is generational change, right? So you think of affordable housing as generational change, and you think about that term, and Teach for America uses that term when they are having teachers go into underserved communities and teach children. And it is this idea that if you start with these students while they're in their education, they have an advantage that they wouldn't otherwise have. And that then translates to how they deal with when they get married. If they get married, they have kids, those kids are now in a better situation. They have two parents that may have graduated high school, college, that wouldn't have otherwise done that. And you create this idea of generational change. And Curtis pointed out that every development that is kind of blocked from affordable housing, you are blocking generational change. Where are those folks going if not for this development? Are they individuals that are coming out of the shelter system that otherwise would stay in the shelter system for longer? Are they couch surfing at a parent or a relative's house because they don't have a place to go, they can't afford a place? And so I don't think it's talked enough that this isn't just an affordable unit for 100 individuals. This is also potentially for those individuals, for their current kids, for their potential kids, for their cousins, for their aunts and uncles, that you have stable housing that creates generational change. We can talk about generational wealth and home buying versus renting as an aside, but let's just go bare minimum and say a safe, sanitary, affordable unit creates generational change for an individual that otherwise, or a family that otherwise, a single mother with kids. If that unit is able to house them for safety, sanitary, affordable, and those kids grow up in that environment as opposed to what other environment they be in, those kids now grow up with a better understanding of the difficulties and also the ability to get out of it and the ability to learn and grow from it, that then they can teach their kids. So that would be the piece that I would say is generally not talked about, and is one that is very, very important to think about as we start to expand the need and the zoning and the development of affordable units.
Absolutely. If I could just say that it makes no sense to perpetuate the idea of living in a bubble, right? Not having the knowledge of how the real world really works, and most families have to go through life, right, with the challenges. It really doesn't serve anybody to just be stuck in a wealthy type of model that you can't afford it, and then it's not your problem, right? So leave me alone. I find where I am, and then I don't need to deal with it. It's absolutely not the way to move forward. I think just the benefits of this exposure, the knowledge is power, right? Knowing how the real world really works, exposing the younger generations to this idea is sustainable. It can build diversity. It can be really inclusive of everybody, families at large, not just of the individual. So I think it is really important. We do need to talk about it.
Thank you all. I've been watching the chat. I'm not seeing any questions come through, but I certainly want to encourage those who are viewing the discussion. This is interactive, so feel free to drop your questions and we'll answer those next. Lisa and Sarah, if I am not seeing the right chat log, feel free to email me. I'll read them. I'm checking messages for you. But Andrew, before we get to those, you added a new term to the conversation that I want to go deeper on, which is zoning. Can you talk a little bit about how zoning and affordability are related and what you might see in store for the city?
I tried to be the only one that didn't answer the NIMBY question, but it is almost impossible to not in the form of zoning. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about zoning, we obviously have a zoning code overlay or overhaul. I don't want to call it an overhaul, but we're basically reviewing our zoning code and updating it and looking at spaces where we can provide some ability to build more units, build more multi-use, multi-unit, mixed-use, mixed-income developments. You know, with zoning and with affordable housing, NIMBY is just a natural progression. I think that the panel did a really good job of what the concerns are with NIMBY. Personally, there are two categories for me, and that is the idea that the misinformation, like the folks that say affordable housing, I don't want Section 8 vouchers. My property value is going to go down. And there is statistical analysis, there's data, and then there's the humanistic side of it that says that you are just wrong, right? That this is just incorrect, that the information is just not correct, and the outcome is not going to be, and to Tim's point, you know, oftentimes they go to worst case scenario, right? And so I think that's one category. I think the other category is, you know, Columbus is a Midwest city. Columbus is rapidly growing in an area that has not always been used to growing, right? We think about Cleveland as a top 7 populated city 60, 70 years ago, and now Cleveland and Cincinnati together don't even get close to the population of Columbus. And so you have neighborhoods that have lived in 1 unit per acre, 2 units per acre developments, and you bought there for that reason. And now we're coming in with 250 apartments, and change is scary and change is hard. When people change careers, career change is scary, it's hard. And so, you know, there is that valid argument of this is change and I'm worried about it. And the answer to that is if we don't do that, then Columbus does not continue to be Columbus. We will stagnate and we will lose opportunities to build the housing that's necessary for the population growth. And if you don't have the housing and you don't have the population growth, you don't have the economic development, you don't have the zoning projects. And, you know, it just isn't going to happen. It's not possible. You can't not build dense and high and then continue to have the population growth and the expected change that Columbus is going to see. So, you know, from a zoning perspective and a housing perspective, it is a harsh reality that it's necessary. It's necessary for that generational change, for living in these affordable units and making units affordable in the city of Columbus. And it's necessary for the population growth in general the city is going to see in order to be able to do more of the things that we have the ability to do. The land trust is going to be the biggest in the state, partially because we have some additional funding. We have a lot of smart people here that know exactly what they're doing, that come from other areas that know how to do this. We have the ability to do those things because we are growing and because we have, you know, some budget that is able to do this. And so all of those compile together, and it is zoning at city council has gotten more contentious, and that's okay, right? It's okay to be to stand up and support a project that some community folks, you know, may not feel is the best fit, but for the greater good of the city of Columbus is necessary.
Thank you. I'm still not seeing any questions in the chat. I'm going to keep pushing through because I've got a million more questions that I'd love to hear you guys expound on. But and let me start with maybe Isabela on this one and work our way across the panel that direction this time. But this is such an awesome project. The work that came out of it, the results, the energy, this competition, I think really is catalytic for Columbus. And I'm curious to know if you had your druthers, what's next? What does the next competition look like?
Well, I don't, it's really a loaded question. It took about 2 years to get this competition done. And, you know, you feel like you never have enough time to do it right, but then you have all the time to do it all over again. So I don't know, like there's always enough time to just get into it again, I guess rethink it. So I am really hoping that this will snowball. It's one initiative that will snowball slowly into others down the road. Honestly, when we were trying to decide even how to position the competition, we felt there were at least 2 or 3 mini competitions inside the bigger ask. So we really could, we even found that this could be a series of competition. We could keep the city busy for 6 more years to come, kind of idea. So I really think the partnership is extraordinary, the commitment, the city, the land bank, the county, the land trust, COCIC, BIA, AIA, it could not be a better partnership. And I hope that we will continue the effort. Exhibits, conversations, hopefully more competition. It's important for all of us.
I mean, as far as what's next, I guess the first question would be how much is the Housing Alliance going to raise for said next competition, which would gauge.
You know, we've got a proposal out there right now, and
I do, yeah. You know, what's next? The 3 of us, as we were talking over there by the designs, we talked about the idea that we are going to have some zoning code changes. And is there the ability on one of these changes, maybe we make a change that allows for something that wasn't otherwise allowed in a certain type of zoning district? Take that change and create the next competition around it and say, you know, before this zoning change, we couldn't do this. Now we can. Let's get creative and do this, whether that be, you know, multiple, you know, I don't even want to preface it with certain examples, but just simply take some of these zoning code changes, pick one of them and say, you couldn't do this before. Now you can do this. Now let's get creative and do this competition again. So something like that, to where we build off of a lot of the successes that was this competition, but then, you know, change some things.
what a fun parameter.
I think
Curtis.
what you get a sense of is that there's a desire for a next home. And we're in it. Like Andrew said, if we can build the next competition around a zoning change that we believe has a lot of merit, that would be wonderful. All the details aren't there yet, but I think there's a consensus that we need to keep moving forward and pushing them. So we're into that.
Now, what I think is really important, at least to us as we look into this kind of effort, is that we maintain this foot into action reality, right? So somehow affect the reality, whether it's a budget that's put out, let's say, to build another unit for an X amount of dollars, right? But just having this commitment, or whether there's an exercise on zoning, right? That it really gets anchored into reality and to this partnership, so we're not operating alone.
Tim, what is the next competition you'd love to submit a design for? And then Eliza, get ready because I'm coming to you next.
You said you want a better kind of like benches or like street furniture that people can sit on, or in the metro park. But you would love to have well-designed furniture that you can street furniture.
That's interesting. Good question.
Yeah.
But if I can just add to my statement, it's important to keep, I guess, pushing, keep experimenting, keep providing opportunity for people to think out of the box. And my hope and desire is that there always will be, regardless of what it is, there always got to be the center. The center has got to be about affordable housing or housing affordability. And we try to experiment best we can to kind of deal with zoning issues so that this thing can be done. And so I believe we're just scratching the surface. I really believe it. I think you're going to find that we're going to do it again. I may not be around, but it all depends on how long that is, right?
Well, I think that's very exciting. That's an opportunity for hope and for something fun in the future. I'm going to return to the panel for one final question after I do some thank yous, but I want to give you guys all a chance to think about it for a second. And my last question will be, where would you send somebody who wants to know more? What book do you love? What site do you really enjoy visiting? What podcast? For somebody who wants to take the next step, where would you send them? But before you answer that, I want to give just a thanks all around. In particular, I want to thank those who sponsored and supported the competition itself. Everybody from Neighborhood Design Center to the Central Ohio Community Improvement Corporation and the Land Bank, the city and the county, the AIA of Columbus, the BIA of Central Ohio. I also want to give thanks on behalf of our organization, the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio, for allowing us to be part of this. I want to give my personal thanks. I'm 100 miles away from you now in isolation with COVID-19, and you very graciously allowed me to continue to moderate, even with this voice virtually, and I appreciate that. I did see that there was one question in the chat bot of, are we going to be able to walk through the actual designs this evening? I want to invite everybody to go to the Center for Architecture and Design that is on display, and it is exciting and it's energizing, and I hope everybody does have a chance to see it, especially as we move into the holidays, and it's going to be just a beautiful display. With that, let me start with our contest winners. Let me start with you two. Where would you send everybody if they want to take another step?
So do you need to learn more about affordable housing?
I think whatever you find to be engaging. If someone says, I saw your design, I love it. Where can I go now? Where are you pointing them?
I just want to, so recently I listened to a podcast, 99% Invisible and by Roman Mars. And they actually did an episode about half of a big house, half of a big home. So it's actually kind of the origin of, our entry to, so to give the tenants or the inhabitants an opportunity to finish the half of the house. So basically, it is the podcast that talk about the winner of that Christopher Prize, in 2016, the Chilean architect, they proposed that idea. So I thought, maybe it is a good way to kind of like think about, what actually we need, as a home, to rethink the idea of the house.
I love it. Tim, what do you think?
I need more time.
Skip, Curtis, you're up.
That's a great question, Carlie, and I'm not going to avoid answering it. But I tell you, the issue around affordable housing is a big issue, and there's a lot of components that affect it. And quite honestly, I read a lot of magazines from that deal with housing and unique dwellings. I'm a big fan of Dwell as a magazine. I'm a big fan of Small Homes, which is a magazine. I don't watch a lot of, is it LGT? What is it? Yeah, I don't watch a lot of that anymore because every time I do that, my wife comes up with plans for me. So that is not allowed in our house anymore. So it is just a variety of different things. And again, we're in an environment where when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about housing. It's not just about the structure anymore. It's about the placement of it. It's about the social issues around housing and so forth and so on. So I just read a lot of different things because all of that is pertinent to what we're trying to deal with. We talked about NIMBYism. That gets at a neighborhood, so I look at those kind of things and read those kind of things, find out what other communities are doing and dealing with. We talked earlier about, Andrew had a great conversation with one of our jury people that live, an architect that lives in California. They have a whole set of different issues and they are dealing with these issues. a little differently than we are. So those kind of conversations, looking at California, not so much as a model, to see how they're handling their issue with homelessness. So there's a lot of places we could go to get information on the issue of affordable housing. And so I don't pick one. I guess I don't have a luxury because the issue is so broad. And as a land trust, we have to deal with all these particular issues.
I love it. Andrew.
So, you know, we talk a lot and being a policy wonk on housing and zoning, we talk a lot about housing, we talk a lot about affordable housing and zoning. And, you know, to me, it just, the color of law really just confirms certain perceptions and taught things that I didn't fully understand. And so that book continues to stay with me on this idea of, you know, we need to learn from our mistakes. Otherwise we are doomed to.
If I were at home, I would have a very strategically placed color of law book on the shelf behind my head. So I second. Isabela.
Well, I think when it comes to housing, there's just an incredible amount of, just an enormous amount of resources out there right now. I am fascinated with modular housing and especially how it's becoming, I think, more and more, I don't want to say affordable, it's a dangerous word right now, but like just more within reach, I want to say, and just not just that, but just how homes are becoming smaller and people are truly looking at what do we really need, just to, you know, simplifying. I would tell people that they'll get inspired just by looking at what's available is just incredible. But also in a really selfish way, I'm just going to tell everybody, just come to the NBC and talk to us. Because that's what we're all about. We want to hear what are the questions that really you deal with, you want to answer. You want to be good listeners. What is the next hot topic? What should we be talking about, right? So as even this question of affordable housing moves forward, what are the other things around it that we should be listening to? So come to the NBC first and foremost and let us know what should be the next set of parameters, maybe that should help us frame the conversation. So yeah, pretty selfish. That's right now.
That's okay.
So we just really that's what we do. We want to listen and frame things for the next steps forward.
So I found this thing. So I came across this project actually in Austin, Texas. We just talked about Austin, Texas. That, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we might be able to learn from. And there's a project that is actually was created by an organization called Mobile Loaves and Fishes Missionary, actually, and they started out as a food truck to kind of like help the community, and they stop and then they just give people like, you know, blankets and food and things like that. And then they created this village called the Community First Village. So if you go to the website mlf.org, and you'll see that it's a really cool concept. It's actually on Dwell magazine, one of the projects that was designed. And for these buildings, they call it the mini home, actually, or the micro home. I'm sorry. The coolest thing about these homes is that they are so small. They don't even have bathroom. Okay, they are like barely 200 square feet. They have a little kitchen. They have a little bedroom and a living space. And they have shared bathroom outside. Now, Austin is not as cold as here in the winter, so you can go outside, I guess, in the middle of the night in the winter. But they have like shared bathrooms throughout. They have like 130 these like micro homes throughout that development, and they have like public transit. And one of the coolest things is actually that so one of the biggest problem actually of a lot of homeless problem actually is that the car repair. Because think about it. If you're poor, you don't have money, your car broke down, you don't have the money to fix your car, you can't go to work, you lose your job, and you're stuck, and you got kicked out. And so one of the things is that in that village, that they have a car care facility for people to actually learn how to fix the car and fix the car in a cheap way and train people, right? It's a job training, but also help people. And so they can actually get a car fixed for cheap. So it's really cool, and it's like very community kind of based and creating efforts that, and there's a good video on there. It's like take like 4 minutes, and it's great, and it talks about a lot of the homeless issue. Obviously, it ties to affordable housing, but they talk about it's not just about the shelter; it's about building community, and that's what they were trying to do, is to build that community out there that they can support each other and go from there. So I think that's a great program that we should look and see if we can learn from.
Well, I think holistic solutions and supporting community is a killer way to end what I thought was a wonderful dialogue. So thank you, all the panelists. Thank you for all the attendees. Have a great evening, and I hope we keep the dialogue rolling.
Thank you, Carlie. Stay well.